Hello, the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann is pleased to bring you half-hour interviews with the two candidates for Rockport Town Moderator. The League is a nonpartisan organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. We do not endorse individual candidates. I am Cynthia Bierley, a voter in Gloucester, and with me is former Rockport Town Clerk Pat Brown. Hello, Pat.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks. So I'd like to start by asking you in layman's terms, what does the town moderator do?
The town moderator brings order to town meeting. He makes sure the room is open, that there is seating for all, that there are speakers for everyone, and in our case, clickers, and he makes sure that everything runs smoothly, and in turn brings order to it so that there's everyone gets the right chance to vote, the same chance to vote, and can participate in town meeting.
And how do you feel you are qualified to perform these duties?
Well, I've lived in town for 43 years. 22 of those years were spent in town government, 5 of them working with the Board of Selectmen. I was the administrative assistant to the town administrator. 5 of those years I spent as assistant town clerk, and 12 years I spent as the town clerk. In that period of time, I attended every town meeting that we had. I participated in town meeting when we had Lloyd Sterrett as a moderator, and then when he passed, Bob Visnick came in, and I was then working with Bob for the past few years.
At a meeting, how do you determine when to shut off discussion when there are still people lined up at the microphone, although no one has said anything new for 20 minutes?
That actually dictates when discussion should be shut off, is when things become repetitive. You can always ask if anyone has anything new, pro or con, towards the motion, but when things get repetitive, it's a good time to shut things off. I hope that the voters of Rockport realize that when they're in town meeting, they are limited to 5 minutes of speaking time, and they can use that whole 5 minutes of speaking time. Oftentimes when people get up to the microphone, they'll ask their question, and that if there's a response, they often are shut off after debate. Where they have that 5 minutes, I would recommend that people prepare something for motions that they want. Make sure that it's all written there so nothing is forgotten, and then take those comments and bring them to the town clerk. This is something that helps the town clerk when they create the record for a town meeting. And oftentimes that doesn't happen.
Thank you. How do you decide when to explain the legal reasons for declaring a motion out of order or not allowing a comment or amendment? And how do you decide when to ask the town council for a legal point?
Well, town council is there to counsel us in all aspects of town meeting. That's why we pay to have him there. He knows better than the moderator the legality of what can be done and what can't be done. Oftentimes, when things are ruled out of the scope, it's obvious the reasons why they've been ruled out. I mean, if your motion is talking about changing a roof on the school, a motion to bring in school buses is not going to be relevant. So it's easy to discern between the two. However, if you've got something that's closer and you're not quite sure, then I would ask the town council to come in and make a recommendation.
Sometimes town meetings and participants can get a bit boisterous. How do you determine when to step in and calm down the members?
Being a calm person myself, I take things in stride. I don't often raise my voice. I think that if things are on an even keel, in turn, people who are speaking will keep it in that mode. However, when people talk about each other or directed towards an individual, oftentimes people can get upset because then it's person against person and it's personal. And that's when people tend to get more boisterous. I would certainly make sure that all the comments go through the moderator and bring up that on a regular basis, that you are not to speak between each other. All comments go through me, and as a negotiator, I would try to settle anything that I feel is leaning towards or going out of control prior to it starting. Of course, if people are just out of control completely, then that's the reason you have a gavel. I would use a gavel, and if it continues, then I would use the constables that are there for just that purpose, clearing someone from the room.
The former moderator, Bob Visnick, ended the practice of advocates bringing handouts to town meeting. That would seem to give an advantage to the town departments and committees that have input to the voters' booklet prepared by the town. Are there any circumstances in which you would allow handouts prepared by private groups of citizens?
In all the 22 years that I've attended town meetings, I don't remember any handouts being provided by an outside party advocating for a certain motion. So prior to Bob, I don't think that was done. If it was done with permission from the moderator. It would be dependent upon what it is that they're showing. I think it's town departments are actually educating the public. They're not swaying the public. In some cases, like the DPW yard in Rockport that they wanted to change. In that case, the plans needed to be shown to see what was being built. It did come across as they were advocating for that building. However, it was educating the public as well. Education is key. If I felt that somebody was educating the public with something that's against something that's going forward, and I looked at it and felt that it was not, it was honest, it was truthful, and it wasn't saying anything that shouldn't be known, then I would probably allow it.
Okay. The former moderator also required that amendments be submitted in writing in advance of the town meeting. Are there circumstances in which you would allow amendments from the floor?
Now, this is one of those cases where people can escalate easy. When you say no to an individual, oftentimes they escalate. If you say, how can I help you, or what you can do, then people understand and they can prepare for the future. However, some people on town meeting floor get an idea, the light bulb goes off right during discussion. And in that case, I would allow a motion to come from the floor. I remember back many years ago when Roxanne Thierry was on the Board of Selectmen just after she stepped down. I don't remember exactly what it was, but there was a problem on the floor, and she made a motion that remedied that problem, and it came from the floor as a spur of the moment. And I thought that that was instrumental during that time to bring that motion forward and come to a conclusion. So I would take motions. However, it does speed the town meeting along if motions are known beforehand. So it's good both ways, but I do remember people standing up at town meeting trying to make a motion and basically being told no, when in fact there are times and places for those motions to be made on town meeting floor.
Okay. Are there any other rule changes you would want to implement for making the town meeting run smoothly?
I think in the past few years we have shortened the length of town meeting by the things that I actually initiated as town clerk. Some of the things that I brought in are certainly the clickers that I found that people, when they stood up to vote or raised a placard, oftentimes they would look around to see how their neighbors were voting. With the clickers, I found that people vote their conscience. Sometimes people don't vote at all, but that's their right to do. But I felt there was more of a secret ballot in that case. So we initiated the clickers, and I think they've worked out very well. I also initiated the iPads when you check in at town meeting. Prior to those iPads, you would go through a book, and every individual had to be looked up by precinct, by street, to find them in the book and then check them off diligently. And then you would go back into their history of attendance of town meetings and elections, and you would have to manually scan each one of the people that you checked in into the computer so that you would have a record. What the iPads did was bring up immediate names, and then all of the people that were checked in, you download the program and bring it up into the state program, and it's immediate. It takes 3 minutes as opposed to taking 8 to 10 hours to upload that information. So that has certainly speeded town meeting along. The other thing I find that has been great is that Mitch is making motions. They're being seconded right away. The screens are there. Perhaps it would, if we could get bigger screens so that people could read what's on them, because people in the back have kind of a hard time seeing what's on the screens. They're depending upon the booklet that they have in front. I do know the booklet comes out on the town website, but it might be better if those booklets are mailed to each individual in town. I know other towns do that, and I don't see why Rockport couldn't, to make sure we get the information at town meeting to the voters and the participants prior to town meeting, so they can then make those motions and write them down and write their comments prior to coming to town meeting. They're better prepared. And granted, you can see it on the website, but if it's mailed to you, it's right there on your kitchen table, and you might just glance at it to see what's going on. It brings more information to the public quicker.
How do you see your role in working with the Town Government and Bylaws Committee and in working with the sponsors of petition articles to make sure that all changes are legal and will be approved by the state?
Part of the problem with town meeting is that many citizens don't know how to go about doing things for town meeting. The language that's used, I just worked as a temporary clerk in Wenham, and I got them through their town meeting. Well, actually, somebody sat in for their town meeting because I wanted to be at Rockport's town meeting, and I was. But I also ran an election, and there was a question that came up about 2.5. Now, I was there when 2.5 came into Massachusetts, and I voted for yay or nay, one way or another, when it was voted as law. And I knew what it was all about. However, the young people that are coming up look at 2.5 and they're not quite aware of what it is. They don't know, and they had a question on the ballot as to whether or not they should override with 2.5. They didn't understand what override meant. They didn't understand that you were going over and above the 2.5% that you could raise the taxes for the fields. And oftentimes people would come in and ask me about it, and I had to educate them because they didn't know about it. Once they were aware, then they knew how they would vote one way or another. But because they were voting, I couldn't explain it to them till after they voted. So it's if we can get the word out on how to create a petition, how to bring things forward to town meeting, how to hold a budget, and how to go to budget hearings. Oftentimes people are told on town meeting floor, well, you can't change that budget. Why weren't you at the budget hearings? Well, most of the public in Rockport doesn't even know when the budget hearings are. They're not even aware of it because they're not in tune to what's going on in state town government. Mm-hmm. So it would be better I would certainly hold workshops. I would feel open to anybody coming up to me. I have created petitions myself with people. I did it as town clerk. I would send them to town council to see if they were legal. I would work with the town administrator to make sure that things that were coming up as motions weren't frivolous and perhaps not necessary, and maybe look at it in as a different way to make sure that person that's getting those signatures has in writing exactly what they want, so that anyone signing that petition knows well what it is that's going forward to town meeting.
The moderator makes appointments to several committees. How would you go about recruiting and screening applicants?
Well, I mean, I've seen it done repeatedly through the Board of Selectmen. They have screened applicants and done interviews at their meetings regularly. Certainly anyone with qualifications towards that committee should be considered, and whether or not they're available. I mean, right now I'm retired. I have the time to do things that I haven't had time to do before. And by running as moderator, I can give back to Rockport for the years that I was an employee there. And I would certainly look at all the qualifications and make sure that anyone coming forward knew the job and knew what was expected of them when they were on that committee, because it does require time. It does require effort. It's just not a position where you sit on the sidelines and not make proper decisions, because decisions need to be made. And Rockport depends on its committees to help the decision makers, such as the Board of Selectmen, make those decisions.
Would you like to make a final 1-minute statement to the voters?
Well, I would like to say that as your town clerk, I would be available to you at any time. I am retired. There's not a whole lot on my agenda these days, which makes it great. I'm impartial. I have always been impartial. I've had years of experience because as town clerk I never stood politically one way or another, so you can be sure that I will listen with an open mind and listen to comments and suggestions and ways to make things better in Rockport. Rockport's a unique community. It's my town. I've raised my kids there. I've been there for 43 years. I would consider living nowhere else. And as moderator, I hope to bring fairness, order, and more participation in town meeting. Because town meeting in the gym as a 72-year-old woman, and I could say that, in those metal chairs, it's torture to sit there for 8 to 10 hours. I'd like to try to make town meeting more comfortable for people to attend. Can we make it shorter? Well, sure. I mean, if there wasn't as much on the agenda, you could always make it shorter. But I think it's important that we hear everyone out and everything that needs to be brought forward at town meeting. And sometimes that requires hours of time sitting on metal chairs and making do with what you have.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Cape Ann, I would like to thank candidate Pat Brown for agreeing to be interviewed, and thank 1623 Studios for providing this filming. Please remember to vote in Rockport on May 9th. Early voting starts May 1st in Rockport Town Hall. Thank you.
Thank you.